I'm not an engineer, I'm a bean counter. I don't know much about, well, I thought I did know something about solar solutions, but after this session, I actually know nothing. And that's why I just want to start off with a question. You know, you have many smart people in this world, professional people, lawyers, doctors, farmers, who are absolute specialists in their fields. But when it comes to solar, it seems like it is a very, very complicated industry. There are many different solutions. So if a farmer gets 2 or 3 or 4 quotations for solutions, and I've spoken to several people here today, some of them are vastly different from the others. The pricing varies, the solutions varies, the hardware varies. How on earth should a farmer evaluate those and make sure that he or she picks the best one? And conversely, how should the industry assist that farmer to make the best possible selection? I don't know, I'm not directing that at anyone specific, but are there any takers?
Okay. Ja, ek dink om te begin, ek dink daar's 'n tipe van 'n checklist wat mense moet deurgaan. So met ander woorde, die eerste ding wat mense moet doen is hulle moet vra vir references. Het die maatskappye al die projekte gedoen voorheen? Is die tegnologie wat geïnstalleer word tipe van wat ons noem NRS 097 compliant? Is die maatskappy, het hulle byvoorbeeld hulle eie electricians of professional ingenieurs wat vir hulle werk? Val as jy groot projekte doen, is die nodige versekering in plek. Met ander woorde, as 'n ou deur 'n dak val of professional indemnity en al daai tipe van goed moet in plek wees. En dan wat ons ook baie keer in 'n check wat ons ook vir ons kliënte baie keer vra is, vra vir die mense vir 'n wetclearance sertifikaat. Want dan beteken dit die persoon hardloop 'n werklike besigheid. Want ons het ook nou al gesien dat van die kleiner, wat ons nou almal so jokingly noem, die bakkie brigades, hulle kwoteer met wet ingesluit, maar dit is glad nie wet geregistreer nie. So met ander woorde, dan is dit moeilik vir ons as groter maatskappye om te compete met hulle. En ek dink dan die ander groot ding is finansiering. Enige besigheid wat bereid is om vir jou finansiering te gee vir jou asset, beteken dit hy glo in die tegnologie. So, en ek dink dis maar hoe ek voel, die enigste manier om ontslae te raak van al die kwotasies daar buite. En performance guarantees, is daar mense bereid om performance guarantees te gee. So met ander woorde, as die plan minder perform as wat hy moet perform, dan betaal hy op basis 'n penalty. So ek dink dis maar net 'n paar van daai punte wat ek dink mense moet na kyk.
We've heard the term Bakkie Brigade a few times today, and I believe there are some players who are not really savory. But is it a case of 10% giving the 90% a bad name, or is the 90% giving the 10% a bad name? How big is the problem of people who are not able to install or supply excellent solutions?
Maybe I'll try to answer it in a way, because I was 9 years on the Subvia board and the chairperson thereof, and Subvia was the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association. So we tried to implement something like the PV Green Card, and that is basically a certificate of compliance and quality control. That is one mechanism to do that. And I have a lot of people come to me and say, hey, look at my quote. Is it legit? Does it make sense? And I look at it, and then I look at the items, and I check each item, what the costs are, and it looks okay. But then I look at the proposal, and I say, is that really, do you really need all of that? So how did you brief the company to do your project? And then the brief was, well, if the power goes off, everything needs to run. And of course, then the ticket is a very high one. And then one needs to check, solar can be done in different stages, and it's built out of modules, so it's modular. You can start with one module and a lithium-ion battery and charge controller. that's how you can start. It's like a very cheap kind of solution or inexpensive solution. And then you build it up, you can grow that thing. You can start with 1 kilowatt system, 5 kilowatt system, and then add another 5 kilowatt system and grow it. So my question is always, what is the brief? What do you really need? And is it that you also look at what is really your demand? Is it you need to run everything at the same time? There mustn't be anybody or nobody should be told, okay, don't switch on this now or that one only later. So that's most of the time the difference. All the quotes I've seen were fair. The items on there was a markup on that, one could see that, but it was sort of fair. But the one quote for a house was 250,000 rand, and the next quote was 150,000 rand. And the difference was basically the one catered for like everything, and the other one catered for essentials. And I think that's where most of the differences also come in. So one needs to really understand what do I need to cover, and then apply that in the brief, what you want. I don't know if that answers your question, but I tried to.
There is a BMW solution versus a Toyota Corolla solution. But does the individual know what the difference is?
So there's two things. The one is if you compare a BMW to a Corolla, both get you from A to B. It's just, the one is more luxury as the other one, or as a brand or something like that. It is more you have to more compare it if you've got a Toyota Bucky or you have got a little bicycle with a little transport box. So you can't put a suck millimill in the back of the bicycle, but you can put 5 of them or 10 of them on a Bucky. So that is the difference. So what purpose is that system for? And not, it gets you from A to B. So that I would say there is the BMW and there's the Toyota Corollas. Of course, you get equipment from top end and you get equipment that is much cheaper. They do the same job. If they last the same amount of years or withhold spikes and all of that is the other question then. But that you get anyway. But what I'm talking about, the huge differences are more about what is the purpose that one buys.
Ronald, maybe a question from you. We've heard several of the speakers said it's critical that the solutions are grid-tied, and because that actually is an important part of the financial equation. Do you foresee that to be ambiguous and common, easy to do over the next few years, given the transmission constraints we have?
Yes, well, the technology itself is more efficient being grid-tied. Otherwise, effectively, everybody has to cater for everything themselves, and you don't get diversity, and therefore you don't get a value spread amongst multiple people. So the transmission grids will be resolved. The question is how fast. And the faster we do it, the more opportunities we have to create more grid-tied, lower-cost events that we have. But even the large-scale utility ones are grid-tied. I mean, they need a strong grid. It just makes more sense to diversify and to make sure that it's at a lower cost that way.
But we're going to see a significant number of, especially farmers, installing these systems. If it's not available in the short term, it may be quite a big problem.
Yeah, I think the question comes also is what of the quality of the grid-tied devices? Because, if you've got 1 or 2 or 3, it's one thing. If you've got a whole lot in one area, and the quality of the devices are poor, it can also reduce the penetration that you can have. So a key aspect is, we really have to look at the quality of the inverters, how they perform, and make sure that they're of high quality so you can put in as many as possible within the networks as you can.
I received a question regarding the exchange rate, which is actually quite, it's a lot weaker now than it was this morning. But it is a very volatile exchange rate, one of the most volatile in the world. So how does this affect this industry, and especially the financing thereof? Are you concerned about it? I know, Chris, you must be in that business and procure in dollars and get paid in rands.
Look, we very worried. You actually have to time your purchases, try and look into the future, but at the end of the day, the projects need to actually continue. So you're never going to buy low and sell high. You're going to I think most of the larger players are in a drive to roll out the technology over a course of time, and there's going to be a levelized average cost of those installations, and there's no other way to look at it. Because, but face it, I think the answer that perhaps and I'm answering your first question now, is we all need to realize that renewables and storage and all of that is brand new to especially South Africa. So when you go and buy a second-hand car, you do it with great care. And I think that's at the end of the day what we need to realize. We're buying second-hand cars, and if everybody goes in with their eyes open, they're going to be kind of happy with the outcome. If they buy in hope, I think that's our biggest risk today, is to buy something in the hope that you will be resolved of a whole bunch of issues. You're going to be sadly disappointed.
I can add something to the risk of the exchange rate, or, let's wait for another month, and maybe in a month's time the solar prices come down. I've seen shopping centers, for example, in the past where they only were allowed to do 1 megawatt onto the roof. 1 month energy savings is about 185,000 rand, just in 1 month. So for that means you can almost pay $1 cent more per watt for buying that a month earlier. So we had grid parity in South Africa, not only in South Africa but elsewhere as well, in 2014. In 2014, the cost of energy from the grid was as expensive as from a solar system. And since then, the grid prices just went up and the solar prices just went down. So every day you wait, if you own a roof and you don't put solar on your roof, you might have too much money. So it's a statement which is very harsh, but not to put solar on is really giving money away. And just to answer your question, grid-tied or off-grid, there's a very easy saying: together or alone you can go fast, together we can go far. So it's always sharing resources is always better. To have a grid has a cable between you and your neighbor, and sharing resources, it's always better.
Might be to come back to that one. Our finding in the market or in the field is the quality of the grid becomes so bad that you actually are forced to disconnect you from the grid. It's not that I will say you not extract energy from the grid, but as a grid forming device, you cannot use Eskom anymore because there's so many brownouts, short interruptions, flashovers in the system in Eskom that give you a very bad quality, especially in certain areas in Eskom. Now, if that's the case, then you actually need to remove yourself from the grid on a grid forming device, and then just extract the energy out of Eskom. And I think that will be the next step, where we just extract the energy, but we disconnect ourselves from the volatility of the grid.
Then you are all in the industry, all supplying good solutions or representing the industry, but the sun not always shines. We've had a rainy season here in Gauteng and in many other parts of the country that was absolutely, I think it's one of those events you see only once every 10 years. If the sun don't shine, the power dries up, pardon the pun. How significant is that problem for farmers, and how adaptable are the solutions to address it?
Just a short one, I give the others option. It is photovoltaic, and the farmers know photosynthesis, so it's light to energy, photovoltaic to electricity. So if there's light, you will get energy. The question is, how much do you over-panel your solar site in order to get enough to run all your appliances and not to use much storage or batteries for those days that it is raining. But it does work even if it's raining. My house works 100% even if the rain pours down.
I think the other thing that you have to keep in mind when making these decisions is that it's normally a long-term decision. So when you're looking at the financial returns or the ability of a system to be able to reduce your costs of running of your electricity consumption, you need to look at a 10 to 15 year timeline in terms of your decision making. Because like you said, everything goes in cycles. We might have a rainy season this year or a storm where the sun doesn't shine for 3 years. But if you look at the averages over 10 years, it starts evening out, and you have to be able to approach it with a long-term view in terms of averaging out over time. So definitely a decision to keep in mind.
Greg, thanks. Sorry I'm late, but there was load shedding, so the traffic was a nightmare. I think what we should just take into account is that all these solutions are part of the bigger solution. I think one of you said it as a speaker. But every installation or every solution that we bring to the table also has some unintended consequences, which we tend not to take into account in our commercial thinking. And one of them is simply to say that if you extract energy from your solar panels during daytime and you decide to use the national grid during nighttime, what you do is you disable the national utility to generate revenue for themselves during nighttime, which then, in terms of the current model of determining the tariff, increases the tariff because the volume goes down. That's just a commercial impact. I think we're in a position in the country where we need all the energy that we can get. So yes, we need to install solar panels, wind turbines, whatever else. But there are regulatory issues that prevent optimal solutions. And it's simple stuff like when the tariff was designed, it was designed for a certain reason like it was. You had a smaller fixed tariff, a connection tariff, you had a larger energy tariff, and the tariff is very high in winter times, peak times, it's lower in summer peak times, but it doesn't anymore give the right signal, market signal, to the market. So we need to redesign the whole system from a systems perspective to start getting it right. Because what's happening now is, let's just take an example of you're a farmer and you need to pump during daytime and you need to cool your milk during peak time at night time, but you have a land rate tariff structure. What happens then is you can put a grid-tied system in, but you can't feed back into the grid. So now you go and you change the design so that you actually become a hybrid system, but forcing it through a switchover that takes you actually off the grid at some stage and puts you back onto the grid at some stage. And there's a lot of unintended consequences in that, which impacts the grid operator and everyone else in the system. So what I'm pleading for is for us to go and sit back and get a lot of technocrats around the table and redesign the system, the way we think, the way we create tariffs, the way we create fixed versus variable. Where could you put a battery? When can you sell back from the battery into the grid? All of those type of things. Because we sit with a 30-year-old system of thinking, with technology that is advanced.
I'm sure we need to think about many things in the country, but I don't think that will happen quickly. That's probably one of the problems.
Ryk, I just maybe want to answer also your question around the bad weather, the clouds. So when we design systems, we work on 50-year-old meteorology data, okay? And that tells us how many kilowatt hours we can create from every kilowatt peak that we install from a solar point of view. And so when you evaluate solar, you have to evaluate it over a year. You can't evaluate it over one day. And I think that the other two things maybe I want to say is, if you've got the capital and you invest it into solar yourself, there is companies like us who will offer you performance guarantees. There's even insurance companies that will offer you performance guarantees. So basically what that guarantee says, if your plant for any reason performs less than what it should be, what the difference is, they will pay you out. So it's called yield guarantees. So and these are people who knows the agriculture world, because they insure everyday temperature or weather. Okay? And then the other way to do it is, if companies finance it, they take the risk. You don't take the risk. So for me, weather, yes, it is there, but it's not. It shouldn't be hold back your decision.
Okay. Any questions from the floor? There's a few of those. Where is that roaming mic? Let me do the roaming thing. Excuse me.
Good afternoon, can you hear me? My question is more specific to, this is all grand to get everything up and running, the solar panels, grid tie, but the major concern that I have is currently where I farm, the substations are under severe pressure. They have not been upgraded for the past 20, 30 years. And 3 of our substations are in a critical phase now, where to such a degree that we have been warned that if they switch those substations off, they're not going to switch it back on. It is all good and well that we talk about expanding and putting in new lines, but how much loss of energy do we have from substation to the farm? Lack of maintenance on the lines. We had blowouts on our line, and I think most of you saw my video, that the line was literally taken out. A whole week we went without electricity. Isn't that one of the points that we should focus on to get Eskom to fix the problems? Rudekopie substation, they've measured the temperature of those transformers last week. It's running at 150 degrees Celsius. 2 out of 3. If Rudekopie substation blows, it's taking out approximately 10% of the agricultural production area within Brits. That's excluding Ontgin, Veerkraal, Mamogalieskraal substations.
Okay. Thanks. Good question. I don't know. Ronald?
Yeah, it's a bit of a, I understand the frustration. It's a difficult question for me. I'm on the transmission side, and that's really it sounds like a distribution question. So it's a bit of a challenge, but I would like to put it this way, is that for a large time in Eskom, there's been a lot of focus on generation and building generation and so forth. In recent times, there's been a significant shift in terms of understanding the critical importance a grid plays, not just on the transmission level, but also on the distribution level. Because a lot of the generation that is mentioned here is coming on the distribution level as well. And the realization that the carrier of the power is critical to allow a market to realize and to make sure that the network, both at transmission side, but also at distribution side, is a critical element. And I think that shift in the mindset is really important, and it should see a lot more investment to hopefully see these types of problems not exist. I'm sorry about that situation. I can always go look into it. But I would say that is a very positive recent aspect that we've seen a change in Eskom.
That's a recent positive from Eskom. Your situation, I don't want to say there's hundreds, but there's a lot. It's a huge amount. So you have two choices. You can either complain and wait for Eskom to do something about it, or if you really want to do something about it, you speak to your entire agri community that's receiving electricity from that substation, start a forum, get communicating with that forum, and then find a solution to actually start doing it yourself. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we are going to go through a period of intense difficulty. And we may see a period of 3 or 4 or 5 months where the load shedding will even improve. If that happens, be very worried. If load shedding continues on this level, that's probably our best shot. Nobody is doing a quick fix, which will be disastrous in the longer term. But if you really want to solve your problem, mobilize your community, get your 10, 20, 30 big farmers together, and get the communication platform. Because at the end of the day, if you want to solve that problem, you're going to solve it, not anybody else.
Would rural maintenance be able to offer a community, say 10, 50, 20, or how many farmers in a certain area? Would you be able to offer a solution not similar to what you're doing in the Free State, but just to manage that whole process? Because, put farmers in a room, I don't think there will be absolutely expertise regarding the electricity management.
Look, if they are organized, and that's what it's about, if your community is organized, every community has a number of electricians operating in that, servicing those farmers. The farmers have got electricians helping them, working for them. So all the tools are actually around. What needs to be done is somebody to organize it and formalize it. How does who's going to pay what revenue? Who's using who's using the power lines? Who's using the PV power? Who's using the diesel? At the end of the day, that's something that we for sure can help them. But at the end of the day, the big chunks must be in place. We can then help. We can even take a minority share, and that's what we're advocating. Is we're saying to the guys, that infrastructure should be owned by the landowners, because the landowners have got the real skin in the game. Everybody else is kind of like the chicken and the egg and the pig. The pig is committed. The landowner is committed. He is the pig. Everybody else can offer advice, but it's the pig that's going to pay the price.
But do you cut Eskom out? You're talking here millions and millions of rands for a farmer. When do you take that decision to say, listen, let's do it on our own? Eskom is, yes, it has problems, but it's still a significant electricity supply. We're going to get renewable energy sources flowing into the grid. We're going to have an unbundling of the transmission and the distribution parts of Eskom. There is hope on the horizon, but when do you decide to go off grid and do what you're suggesting? Because that can be very, very expensive.
On grid is always, it remains. You're never going to just sever the connection. You don't need to sever the connection, and your investment decision is not going to be based on we're going to pay more now in the hope or in the belief that Eskom is not going to survive. Your investment decision now is going to be based on the fact it is still a sound decision whether Eskom is surviving or not. That's still the right thing to do. So if Eskom pulls through, you still haven't lost anything. If Eskom doesn't pull through, you have a fighting chance. And that's where we need to come up. And if we're talking about millions of rands, there's farmers that's spending 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 million rand on their farms, but doing it on an individual basis. The moment you have 10 or 20 farmers together, that 20 million rand suddenly drops to 2 million rand a piece. And that's the economy of scale. So if you cooperate, you could be anywhere from paying a 1/6 of the price to a 20th of the price to perhaps a 50th of the price. But then you need to cooperate and work together. Then get an expert that actually can operate that grid. And that's the one thing, we're dealing in an environment where if somebody is in business in PV for the last 3 or 4 years, it's a long time. But actually it's not a long time. How do you guarantee a system for 10 or 20 years if you've only been around for 5? Are you with me? So the people, there are a number of people out there that can actually assist the farmers to get that done, that will put skin in the game.
Are there examples of such collaboration between farmers or communities?
Yes, again, I mean, now I'm referring that you all know about in the Free State. The farmers there are climbing on board on this scheme because they know there's an operator with skin in the game. They have skin in the game because it's their farms. And we can actually either take over Eskom's networks or build new networks, because those networks are old and would have need to be refurbished in any event. And now suddenly you're sitting with a financeable model. And that financing doesn't have to all come from all the parties involved. Once we sort out the regulatory matters and we open the industry actually for the entire country, because that's what we need, is we need policy certainty on the regulation side. Not we know somebody with Eskom so we can sort out the 10 farmers' problem. That's not the solution. If we solve our problem, his problem needs to be solved. He needs to know that he can actually, the market, the regulations are in place for him and his 10 or 20 neighbors to actually do the same thing. And that's what we need. We need all these pockets to start blossoming. And we can only get that right if we address the regulatory issue, which is now blocking all of this. But it doesn't stop us from mobilizing, from getting our platforms, identifying who your services providers are going to be, identifying who's going to do the solar installation once you get there. That doesn't have to stop that. All of that has to happen. And if you're talking to somebody now and you want to place the order next year and he's still around, that's a good sign.
There was another question over there.
Thank you. I've got a question in connection with the grid. I've just heard that the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy issued an international tender for battery systems in the Northern Cape totaling 513 megawatt, and I would like to know in what way it will alleviate pressure on the grid, and also to what extent will it optimize power delivery to clientele. Thanks.
Is it on? Yeah. If you have a look in the transmission development plan, you'll see that these batteries are also incorporated in the plan. And effectively, the batteries are used in two ways. The first is that they displace the generation when it's at peak, so you basically charge in the battery. And that provides relief of the constraint, so we can add some more renewables in the area. But what it also does is you'll see that they're allocated at specific locations. And the reason for that is that under a system event, the network becomes very stressed. And the batteries don't just absorb the megawatts, but they also provide dynamic megavars. And what that is it supports the network under these stressed conditions in a very rapid way. So where they are placed is all the critical nodes that are feeding power out of the grid, so that if we have an event anywhere in the grid, we get both the absorption of the energy and a rapid voltage support to be able to increase the transfer capacity out of the area. Yeah. Maybe just I need to comment on the last comment that everybody wants to move off the grid. I mean, I would really be interested to look at his example and get more information about it before I can actually comment on it. So I would like to get in touch with the gentleman afterwards to understand the problem better.
Any more questions from the floor?
My name's David. Thank you very much for this opportunity and for this day. It's fantastic. I've got a few questions, and these might be just technical questions that someone could answer for me, but maybe I should just put them out there. These are some of the questions I have, and I'll just list them and then you can go for it. The first one, someone mentioned about cleaning the panels because of dust, and I'd just like to know what the effect of that is. And the same thing on that was if you've got shadows and basically you have shadows on the panels, does that actually stop the efficiency of those panels, and how does that happen? The next thing is single phase and three phase. What's the difference, and is there a difference in costing with regard to having that done? Then prepaid conlog meters. A lot of us in Pretoria have these meters. They were installed by the municipality, and understand that there's some problems with having power, having solar power with regard to that. Yeah, and that's my questions. Thank you. Back to you.
I can answer a few in terms of cleaning. It's vital. I've been to Westbank's site on the concrete highway there. You see it all over on concrete highway. They were calling me, and it was our panels, and I said they don't perform. And when I arrived, I saw that was like a layer of this much on that. Just to give you an idea, after cleaning, the performance went up by 19%. 19%. So cleaning is vital. Yes, we've got rain that washes that dust off, but I had also a site in Katu on the shopping mall, and the guys were also cleaning that, and what they did, actually they watered it. So they thought they grow, but anyway, if you just water it down, the panel cools down, and all of a sudden the efficiency goes up. But as soon as it is dry, the dirt is still there. So you have to wash them. Just water, that's it. That's the best to do it. The other thing you were spoken about shading. Yes, shading effects, unless you've got optimizers or microinverters per panel that can optimize each panel individually. Newer panels, if you look at big solar farms, they stand in a row, they're solar panels, and they are called dual cut or double cell. There's different kind of names for it. What it means is that the module is divided in a bottom and a top part, and if the bottom part gets shaded, the top part still performs, and the performance only drops by about 5%. But yes, if you've got bird shit or leaves or something like that on it, or a chimney, it does make an effect on that entire row, on that string. So yeah, I think that's from my side the questions. Yeah,
I just think we need to really understand where you're going with this question, because it depends on your loads, and also depends on the size of your system. If you have a relative small size system for a typical home, then three-phase not really makes sense, because say you have 10 amp per phase, you cannot even boil a kettle on one phase because you overload that specific phase. If you have 30 amps available on one phase, you at least can do something with that. So there's especially in Sandton, the sun syndrome, some of that people, the house owners, they don't want that, they want three-phase, and they become quite obsessed with that. For small installations, it's go single phase. The moment if you start going for bigger installations, and I say 20 kilowatt, 30 kilowatt and up, it makes sense to go for a three-phase system, because then all your pumps and your motors is running on three-phase. So technically that's better to do that. The reason for that is reduce the amount of cable work, you have a far better stable system, your torque on your motors for starting is far better. You're not getting a 20 kilowatt a single phase motor, you need to go for a three-phase motor, because it's just not working, So I think normally for a house, it must be a very big house before I will recommend 3-phase. Otherwise, you always struggle with 1 phase, and 1 phase is overload. And maybe just to touch the question on the shading, it's if you have a normal solar water system and you have a 10% shade, you lose 10% of the power. Roughly on a solar system, you can lose on one panel, say like on the bottom portion of the panel, if you lose 3% or 3% shading, cut out about 30% of your panel. So shading on solar panels is not a good thing.
There's a question there at the back.
Sorry, just the last one was the metering thing. That's what I'm just going to answer you in general. If you reverse flow and you push electricity back through certain meters, it can go into tamper mode, so the meter trips, and you shouldn't export. Secondly, that meter could also be set on absolute. Now, when an electricity meter is set on absolute and it's a bidirectional meter, you're going to pay for the electricity when you receive it, and you're going to pay for the electricity when you export it as if you have received it. So a lot of people think, but why is my electricity bill remaining the same? Because they're exporting and then they get billed for that electricity. So it's quite important that you deal with your electricity services provider and understand how your metering actually works.
There's a question there.
Hi, thanks. I hate doing this. I actually want to make a comment rather than ask a question, but it's a trait of mine, I'm afraid. So it's Clyde Mallinson, and the comment I want to make is that farmers have a great opportunity to club together, find the closest substation, small one, distribution, 10 megawatts, maybe 20 megawatts, overbuild for their requirements, siphon off what they need, and flog the rest to the rest of the country who's desperate for electricity. So I'm calling for farmers to branch out into becoming solar farmers. But I'm a geologist, so I actually prefer using the term solar miners. So you can get double benefits from your farm by getting electricity, but also farming photons. And I think Ronald will probably let us know that the ability to connect at that distribution level, there's still plenty of substations that can take 10 or 20 megawatts without too many problems, as long as the river's not overflowing downstream, if you know what I mean. So you need the storage as well, so that when you are delivering into the grid, you're doing it when there isn't a traffic jam on the Grayston off-ramp. Thank you.
Okay. There's a question over there and another one here. While the mic is roaming, I just one question. Somebody during or I think several people referred to it, that you need to put up 1 hectare of solar panels. Somebody even said 100 hectares of solar panels. What if a farm doesn't have 100 hectares to spare or 1 hectare to spare? If you have a very high intensive farm and farming operation, is that a practical impediment?
Look, it is. The problem, however, on the environmental side is an issue. So we just bought a 220 hectare farm that's under pivots. Now, the farmer has actually offered the land because it borders the town. And secondly, he can't run the pivots because there isn't any electricity. So he'd rather sacrifice that farm and then have all these other pivots operational. Now, the EIA legislation and the requirements there means that because that is agriculture and pivots, agriculture doesn't want to approve that to be a PV site, yet the infrastructure for electricity is there. So hopefully with the new regulations that's been announced, perhaps some sanity will return, because we're doing less damage with PV on agricultural land than when they rip and plow and do all the other issues. So it's not just an issue of do I have enough land, it's an issue, do I have land which is suitable under the NEMA legislation to actually be able to put my solar panels. Because I may find out I'm close to a watercourse or close to a wetland or close to, and then suddenly is the 30 or 100 meter exclusion zone and a whole lot of other issues, which, so it's not just do I have the land, I may have the land, but I realize I can't use it.
Questions over there? Yeah. I think I saw another hand. Here's one over here.
There we go. Thank you very much. Just to introduce myself, my name's Theo de Jager from Sapphire. And first of all, just like to thank SONSA for putting this conference together and bringing together a group of like-minded individuals to solve a multitude of problems that we face as a country. Just on that note, I'd like to pose a general question to the panel. If you look at agrivoltaic solutions and you look at solving both food insecurity, energy insecurity, and creating additional revenue streams for farmers, what, in your opinion, is the sort of biggest stumbling blocks and biggest bottlenecks to getting that started in South Africa? And then secondly, maybe for Wessel, if he's seen a demand for that sort of project in the country. I know at the moment we are all focused on energy security, but hopefully there is a point further down the line where energy security isn't necessarily the primary factor, and then it becomes to diversifying revenue streams and so on. And maybe Warren can also speak to that. I know you're doing work with blueberries, but perhaps just speak to that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, agrivoltaic is definitely a big growth area in globally and in South Africa. I mean, even the plants that we're putting up in Phalaborwa, big portions of it includes agrivoltaic. And it's probably because a lot of that land were earmarked for agri. Okay, and the thing is, if you put agrivoltaic underneath panels, of course you get the hothouse effect, and you basically get a higher harvest per hectare almost than what you can get in the open, and especially in areas like Phalaborwa where there's not a lot of water. So you can easily do aquaponics or any of those type of things where you basically reuse the water. So I mean, we see a big demand for that currently. And I mean, we're doing even some high-end residential houses in Waterfall area where we put built structure, put the panels east-west, and then that creates a hothouse effect underneath, and you just put shade netting around and the person have his own nursery, basically, with his own hothouse. So it's definitely an opportunity.
Yeah, I think what you said is also critical. You know, when we're looking at funding any form of project, we kind of assess each project in terms of how can we reduce the waste, but also how do we bring additional revenue streams onto the farms. And, you know, being able to take a piece of land where you're taking 100 hectares to be able to put up solar panels and you're only generating one income stream off it is sacrilege. In fact, you know, there's multiple ways that you can repurpose that land. You know, being able to raise the structure and have grazing underneath, or being able to look at agrivoltaic solutions. I must admit they're doing a lot of trials globally in terms of semi-transparent panels, and you know, maybe the experts can give a bit more insight into those type of panels to be able to create these hothouses and these greenhouses to be able to do multi-purpose farming, not only farming the sun but farming, you know, produce. I know that the yields coming off some of these projects that they're doing specifically in Europe is proving quite promising, and we're really waiting for that technology to really get better down in terms of being able to execute in terms of rolling out those type of agrivoltaic projects. Because at the end of the day, it's still an investment decision. You still need to be able to generate those returns from using new technology and new solutions like that.
Are there any farmers here? Because the message I get is, listen, this is going to cost you money, but in future you will save. I don't know many farmers, currently in the environment, it's tough times out there. I would like to have a comment from a farmer or two just to say, listen, this is my perception of the situation and this is how I will deal with it. I don't know, Theo, if you also want to comment to that. But there's one over there. Yeah.
It's easy to say that we must invest into solar panels. But over the past year, to give you guys an idea of the situation agriculture is sitting in, excluding load shedding, with the whole thing that happened in Ukraine, the prices of fertilizer, chemicals had a massive jump. Right? We're not talking 50%. Some of our fertilizers jumped 300%. In the end, we as farmers are currently to just break even under irrigation, to give you guys an idea. To produce wheat, to break even, we need to harvest 5 tons at the current price. Should the wheat price drop, that would cause us to, the tonnage per hectare will increase to break even. Right? What happened last year, in the Brits area, for instance, 30% of the wheat that was taken in by the silos was feed grade. Because of load shedding, guys, that fertilizer price increase and all of that, we started harvesting late. Rains came and we couldn't harvest. I myself ran into that problem. And a lot of farmers can't offset these expenses. We have had increases on a lot of our loans due to the increase in our interest rate hikes. So in the end, from February, we sat down, a few of the farmers in our area sat down, and we calculated from February to February this year, what was our increase on, and we're standing at 13.25% overall expenditures. That's excluding buying a new tractor, new Hilux bucky. We took what we saw as necessary to run the farm. 13.25% more expensive.
That's significant. Just keep those comments short, please. I would like the panel to react. You want to get paid.
The gentleman before laid the picture, but I think the question that comes out of it, or one of the questions that come out of it, are about finance solutions for energy. Now, we heard a little bit about finance solutions just now, but the question is, can those finance solutions be built alone without necessarily having to cash flow them out of the farm produce? Are there models where we can look at energy solutions as standalone enterprises, because farmers are under pressure, huge pressure, right across the country. Some guys are flooding, some are, we had riots in KZN, there's a lot going on. But the finance solution has to be very standalone, I think.
I think that's an excellent question.
I think there are solutions out there. A lot of talk has been had around PPAs or rooftop rentals or some form of financing where the operator or the EPC or whoever's designed that system will finance the erection of that system, and you will then essentially purchase that power from that funder or from that institution. So there are ways around having to fork out money for yourself. A lot of these new investment vehicles that are operating in a regulated environment, so governed by the FSB and governed by regulations in terms of normal investment vehicles, are also looking to capitalize on the massive growth that's been experienced in the solar industry, and being able to have additional corporate governance and additional layers of the regulation in terms of the rollout of these projects also helps in terms of de-risking it from your side, knowing that it's reputable companies that are handling it for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got two answers to it. So the first thing is, if you want to self-fund, I mean, you've got all the 12Bs and things like that that can assist you, and especially for the next 2 years. I mean, I can't remember who presented earlier, but you will be able to claim 125%, no limit for the next 2 years. Okay, and that's on all renewable energy projects. I mean, that's what was announced at the budget speech. So that alone is a huge benefit for a farmer, because sort of like jokingly, it addresses two of your problems, SARS and electricity. Okay, and then as far as funding is concerned, I mean, I always say, and I mean, I think other people maybe agree, funding is not the problem. Good projects is the problem. So if we can get good projects, and as we said, if you group a few farms together, it becomes a big project, funding is not the issue. There's enough funding out there for these projects. It's just to get good projects. That's the problem.
Jan, I think something you mentioned during your presentation was farmers need to actually look at their consumption and be very clear exactly as to what they use. And you also showed a picture of a, what is spulpunt in Engels?
Pivot.
A pivot, which can be more energy efficient. How important is it for farmers to actually try and cut their electricity usage by using new technology? And how does that work into this mix?
Our finding is it takes quite a challenge to coach a farmer, in general, through the whole change of how they're doing things. Because they're very strict in certain ways of doing things. And you find some farmers will not change at all. Some farmers are willing to change. Typical, take that as an example, there was a lot of experiments, especially up in Limpopo, with lead-power irrigation systems on the pivots. It reduced your pressure to 0.7 bars on the pivot. Huge saving in that. Energy saving. So now you start looking at, you use the same pump with substantially less energy. That reduced the cost of your solar installation substantially. I've one incident now where the farmer is running 2 pivots from one pump, and he run it already for the past, say, 20 years. Then this pivot, then that pivot. So the request was, you have a problem because you need to pump 16 to 18 hours a day, and now load shedding push him back. He could not complete his irrigation cycle. So we've started doing measurements on the pumps, the flow, the pipes, do backwards calculations, redesign the thing. And the outcome was he can just open the second pivot and run 2 pivots simultaneously. The pump was running at a 35% efficiency. Now the pump is running at 80% efficiency. So he used the same amount of power, but half of the time. So he can go now through his entire irrigation within 8 hours a day. So before we even install solar, there was a huge saving. Now the next step will be is if you make a decision to go for a total off-grid system, it's very easy because you have 8 hours a day and you can relatively easily cover that with a total off-grid system. So typical what we're finding is if you do this calculation and you tell the farmer he need to upgrade his pipe, maybe put an extra pipe in it so that we can push up the water flow, that we can get all the water at the right time on the crops. They're not willing to do that because R1 million on that is a problem, but they're willing to spend R6 million on a battery. You understand? So that's what I say is we need to change. In the past, we've designed a factory or we designed an irrigation system. The problem there for electricity was cheap. So the farmer go to the corporation or the agri whatever, co-op. They design a system as cheap as possible. So you can hear, if you stand at a pump station, you can hear it. That pumps are screaming. There's so much cavitation. It's just a nightmare. And now, and they need, say, 1 megawatt from Eskom. Eskom gives them 1 megawatt. And what I said is you need to take 2 steps back and say, let's redesign the system, or get someone to redesign it. So sort this portion out. Now suddenly your saving is substantially cheaper. The reason for that is in the past, Eskom was operational cost for the farmer. Now we changed it, so the pivot was capital cost, Eskom was operational cost. Now the whole game changed. The irrigation system is capital cost, the solar installation is capital cost. So now you can reflect very nicely and say, but you need rather spend money on your irrigation system, or rather spend money on your light system, or rather spend money on your factory, or whatever you're busy with. The chances is there always that saving, the total cost saving, is substantially.
Now with that structure, I'm an accountant. I can definitely see if you move stuff from the income statement to the balance sheet, it can pose a problem. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just, Jan, that's exactly what it is. So if we all look at more generation, where can we get more generation? We have got a huge amount of generation today available, and that's on the demand side. And I don't mean load shedding. Demand side means how do you manage the use of your, how many hours are you running your pool pump? A simple question. My pool pump runs half an hour, maximum 45 minutes. I see pool pumps running 7 hours. What for? That's really a huge amount of generation capacity on the demand side that we could save. And that's one of the most urgent things everybody can look into. So that's really, I agree with that. If we can, change our behavior, it will make a huge difference.
Any final questions?
Sorry, if I might comment on that as well. I think that's a very, very valuable comment, because even if you want to go partially off-grid or grid, this is the first stage you always go through. You always go through an efficiency stage, a stage to segment critical load from non-critical load, how to get more efficiency, how to drop the capital cost of what you have to do. But if that is done globally first, I mean, we had the presentation to say 15, 20% could be cut off. Well, if you've got 30 gigawatts and you cut off 20%, that's 6 stages of load shedding gone. So the issue is that in this ecosystem of security of supply, the load is a participant in the ecosystem. And that is a valuable contribution. Even if you want to go off grid, you actually take in the steps towards whatever you want to do, but contributing to the total global system.
Yeah, absolutely. As they say, speak now or forever hold your peace. There's another one there.
Okay, hi. Sorry guys, my name is Richard. I want to ask the panel to look here a bit into a glass ball. What do you think is the prospects of load shedding, and when are we not going to have load shedding again? I mean, I think if the general public and the farmers have a better idea of when this will happen, they can make better planning and make better decisions. So, and the government says 18 to 24 months. We all know it's not going to happen, but that's what the public believes. So I think we need to create a more accurate narrative. And how do we get there? So I think the public makes the decision based on 2 years. Maybe I can hold on. Maybe I can live with it. Like maybe something will happen. We hope it will get better. But we're not. The public is not educated. So I think we need to educate the public and say that's not going to happen. Make a plan. So I don't know. What's your opinion?
Never. Okay, that was a short answer. And I've got a similar answer to that, because I don't think in the next 2 years it's going to get better, or it's not even going to stay, it's going to get worse. So if what is happening at the moment is bad, then prepare yourself. But why do we want to wait off a central generation industry or ESCOM solving or coming up? Because they have asked since I don't know when it was, they've asked for many, many years, decades back, we need more generation. They didn't get it. So the question is no longer that, are they going to have now all of a sudden taps open and build many more generation plants? No, it's not going to happen. So the question is actually that I would ask myself, do I want to earn my own generation plant and generate my own power and save money? That's my question. Since 2014, as I said, we had grid parity. Since then, every kilowatt hour out of a solar system is cheaper than buying from a grid. And that's not only in South Africa, that's globally. So whatever you do currently, and not because I want to sell more solar panels, at the moment I can't cope with the demand, but from my perspective is whatever you do today, whatever decision you do, go ahead and do it yourself. And just think about something that's very important for us in South Africa especially. Solar power is the only generation method of electricity that is democratic, because you own it. You produce your own power. You're in charge of that. And I think that's going to change a lot for this country once we all understand that and make that kind of decision. And it's for everybody. That's for the person in the RDP house, or somebody in a shack, or somebody that lives in a big villa. Doesn't matter. If you can generate your own electricity, you will always benefit from that.
Just one comment from my side, and Tommy, maybe you can help me. There are numerous projects coming online over the next 18 months to 2 years from mining companies and big industry that will take demand off the grid. And that will also make a big difference. Tommy, I don't know if you have more accurate stats.
It is, I think you're right, there's a lot of projects. We talk about the 9 gigawatt of solar and wind combinations that's coming in. The grid-sized batteries that's going to come in the next while. So there's a lot of positive things, but I don't see us resolving the load shedding issue soon. And it might be 2 years, it might be 3 years, it might be 4 years, but what we must understand is a big part of our lack of GDP growth and lack of creation of employment is a function of not having electricity. So maybe we can move the needle down from stage 6 to stage 2, but stage 2 still destroys jobs and GDP. So we need to get to a place where we've got a safe level of reserve margin again in the grid, where there's space for maintenance, where there's space to build grid, to expand grid, and to strengthen grid. And for that we need this. So I think, I've said it in my presentation earlier, the government has proven consistently since 2007 that all the decisions they've made has led to more load shedding, not to less. We started at one day, Black Thursday, the 24th, I think in 2007 or 2008. And last year we were on permanent stage 6 since November till January. I mean, it's scary stuff. I think we've shed 11 terawatt hours in the year, last year. 11 terawatt hours is 5% to 6% of the total energy for 1 year. In 2016, the demand was, I think, 216 terawatt hours. We're now on 198, something like that. So it's a massive destruction of economic activity. So as soon as we increase energy availability, economic activity is going to follow and kill that availability. So let's not hope load shedding is going to end. let's end it by adding energy efficiency, process optimization, new generation, as well as storage and grid strengthening.
Okay. Any final comments?
I mean, currently we're battling to supply 30 gigawatts as a country. But when this economy is 100% pumping, now our demand should be around 50 gigawatt. So if we battle to get 30, and we should actually sit at 50, because there's so many smelters. I mean, there's big smelters standing still, for instance, in Leidenburg. I mean, those guys want 80 megawatt base load, but they can't start their smelters because they can't get the power from the grid. So I don't think the problem is going to get less. And I think if we believe in this country and we want to grow this country like I do, I think we must take ownership.
I think we can speculate a lot, but the facts is one of the slides that I've put on is Eskom is switching off power stations. And those power stations is so old, you can just do yourself a favor and go and drive there. And it's not even necessary to go in. You can just stand in a distance and look at it. You will see what I mean. It's bad. So they've no other choice than to switch off the power stations. Or the power stations will switch off themselves, one by one. And if you look at the graph, you will see how quickly it starts falling down within 5 years from now on. So if we want to solve the problem, it will take us, if you're not solving it within 5 years, you will have continuous. If you can solve it within 2 years, there might be a little bit of time that you will not have, but after it will start again. I think that's the most important thing to look at. That's the reality. And if you do calculations, you must remember also solar. We mentioned like gigawatts coming on. But if you look at solar, and I've taken Kendal as an example, if you take Kendal out, you need to replace Kendal with solar panels. You need something like 50,000 hectares of solar panels just to replace Kendal, plus storage. That's if you run Kendal full blast, because you have 668 multiplied by 6 megawatt 24/7. With solar, you're just getting daytime solar. So you need to replace every power station you take out, you need to install a lot of panels, more than you can supply.
Just for the farmers, as we've said here, team up. I remember 2014, I was on the mining in Daba, and they looked at me, Vito, what are you doing here? Because I was in mining before. And I said, well, I want to sell you solar panels. They said, what is that? I mean, not really. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't use diesel. There's no oil. Not for us. Go with the camping guys. Today it has changed. And there was a slide earlier from somebody about the disruption. We're living in this disruption, and farmers can be the next grouping industry that can cause another disruption. You are the ones that can do this kind of disruption. Team up. I've got farmers in the Northwest, chicken farmers, they came to me and said, Vito, can't we buy from you directly? I said, well, I need quantity. No problem. They came, all the farmers came together. I did a Teams call with them. I presented everything, and they all chipped in, and they did group buys. So it is there, and you're already organized through all these organizations that are here today. That is really where I think this country needs to go. The farmers are going to be the next ones that's going to make this kind of difference in the energy industry.
The comment I want to make is the caution. The caution is that be careful of looking after yourself. If you think you can isolate yourself and make sure that you're okay, but the rest of South Africa is not okay, you're not okay. We have to have a look at the holistic problem, how to solve the solution. It's not just solving your solution, it's solving our solution. And that is part of the reason why there's a plea to say, there's no doubt we have to get these smelters going. We have to get the farmers secure supply and food security. We have to do it. We also have to connect all of this plant fast. And if we're going to do that, we have to come together, accelerate what we need to put on the grid, and accelerate the grid. You are not going to have these volumes without the grid connected. And so again, the plea goes out to assist in that, to connect the grid. We also need energy efficiency, we also need rooftops, we also need embedded generation and so forth. All of these things contribute, but we really need a collective solution to this problem and not just an individual solution.
I'm going to halt it there. Tommy, Wessel, Ronald, Warren, Chris, Vido, Jan, thank you so much for your time.